The first thing Sienna noticed was the way Devon's hand brushed the small of Renata's back as he pulled out the chair next to his. Not Sienna's chair. Sienna was already seated, on the far side of the round table at Verdant, the kind of restaurant in Buckhead where the lighting was bright above the marble bar and softer over the tables, where the menus had no prices on the copies handed to women, and where every waiter knew to refill water glasses without being asked. Sienna had chosen this restaurant herself, 2 months ago, when Devon had told her his firm was hosting a small celebration for the close of a major deal. The chair he pulled out was on his left. The chair on his right was hers. He did not pull her chair out. Renata Calloway sat down with the easy smile of a woman who had been pulled into chairs by men her entire adult life. She wore a sapphire blue dress that was cut to be noticed. Her shoulder-length hair was sleek and parted on the side. She turned to thank Devon with her eyes lowered just enough to be charming and just enough to be deniable. Sienna watched all of this without moving her face. She had spent the last 6 months training herself to keep her face still. It had become one of her better skills, alongside encryption auditing and cross-system threat modeling. There were 8 people at the table. Devon's boss, a man named Kenneth Ashbury, sat across from Sienna, beside his wife, Margaret. 2 senior associates from Devon's firm flanked them. Renata sat to Devon's left. Sienna sat to his right. The wine arrived. Devon ordered for the table without consulting anyone, which he had started doing about a year ago. He had begun, around the same time, to introduce her at events as my wife, Sienna, before adding she does something with computers, which always got a polite laugh. Sienna had laughed along the first 3 times. By the 4th, she had stopped. By tonight, she had stopped doing many things. Margaret Ashbury, who had spoken with Sienna at exactly 2 prior events and had been kind both times, leaned across the table. Sienna, you're in cybersecurity, is that right? Devon mentioned you handle some sort of consulting work. I run my own practice, Sienna said. Her voice was even. I handle corporate threat assessment and breach response for several firms in the Southeast. Oh, Margaret said. Her eyebrows lifted, in the small way that polite women lifted their eyebrows when they realized they had been told something interesting. Which firms, if you can say? Before Sienna could answer, Devon laughed. It was not a quiet laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been waiting to interrupt and had found his opening. Don't let her start, Margaret. She'll talk your ear off about firewalls and zero-day whatevers. My wife is the smart one in the family. I just bring home the actual money. There was a small ripple of laughter around the table. Renata covered her mouth with her napkin, which made the laughter look discreet and made it carry. Sienna picked up her water glass. She drank from it. She set it down precisely on the linen tablecloth in the same circle of moisture it had left a moment before. Renata, who was either careless or brave or both, leaned slightly toward Devon and said, just loud enough, you 2 are so cute. You always make me laugh. Margaret looked between them. Margaret was a woman who had been married for 31 years. Her face did not move. But her eyes did. Kenneth Ashbury, who had not been listening closely, said, Renata, I keep telling Devon he stole you from the Charlotte office. Best thing he's done all year. Oh, Renata said, in the tone of a woman who had practiced the word in a mirror, Devon and I, we just work well together. We're friends. She turned to look at Devon. He was looking at her. He looked at her for 2 seconds longer than a man at dinner with his wife should look at any woman. Margaret's eyes flicked to Sienna. Sienna smiled. The smile reached nowhere. Devon laughed again, leaning back in his chair, gesturing loosely with his wine glass. See, my wife knows. She's solid. She's not the jealous type. Renata is just a friend. Right, baby? He turned, finally, to look at Sienna. The table waited. Sienna had a reply. She had been carrying it for 6 months. She had revised it 3 times in her head this week alone. She had it in writing in a folder on a thumb drive in her bag. She said, "Of course." Devon's face relaxed. He winked at Renata. The conversation moved on, the way conversations did when one person at the table had decided not to make a scene. Margaret looked at Sienna for a long second. Sienna saw what Margaret saw. Margaret was a woman who had been married long enough to recognize the look of a woman who had not given up but had simply stopped fighting in the wrong room. Margaret nodded, once, almost invisibly. Sienna picked up her menu and began to read. 6 months earlier, on a Sunday afternoon in February, Sienna had been folding laundry in the bedroom of the Atlanta home she had purchased 3 years before she met Devon. The home was in her name. The mortgage was in her name. The renovations had been paid out of her business account. She had insisted on this when they married. Devon had been mildly offended at the time, and then, when the housing market shifted and his own portfolio took a hit, deeply relieved. She had been folding a stack of his shirts when one of them had slipped, and a folded slip of paper had fallen out of the breast pocket. It was a receipt for a hotel room in Charlotte. He had told her he was at a conference in Tampa. Sienna had picked up the receipt and held it for a long moment. She had not confronted him. She had photographed it. She had logged the date, the hotel, the time of the charge, the card number. She had returned it carefully to the pocket of his shirt, refolded the shirt, and placed it on top of the others. Then she had gone downstairs to her home office and opened a fresh document and given it a name that was not noticeable: Q2 Practice Notes. She had begun a list. She did not yet know what the list would become. She only knew that she was a woman who had spent 15 years documenting things for a living, and the habit had become her instinct. Now, 6 months later, she sat at a round table at Verdant under bright marble light and watched her husband laugh and call another woman his friend. She picked up her wineglass, took the smallest sip, and listened. She was very good at listening. Patterns were what Sienna was paid to find. Her clients did not pay her to listen to feelings or to weigh whether a person seemed trustworthy. They paid her to look at server logs at 3 in the morning and find the small, repeating shape that meant something was wrong. A login from an IP address that belonged to one office but happened during the hours another office worked. A file accessed by a user who had no reason to need it. A calendar event scheduled and quickly deleted. Patterns were impatient. They wanted to be seen. The trick was being a person who was willing to see them. Sienna had been seeing them for months before the receipt fell out of the shirt pocket. The first one had been the cologne. Devon had worn the same cologne for the entire 8 years they had been together. It was a green, slightly woody scent that she had bought him for their first anniversary. In December, he had come home wearing something different. It was sharper, more expensive, the kind of scent that announced itself in an elevator. She had noticed it the moment he hugged her in the kitchen. She had not asked about it. She had logged it. The second pattern had been the late nights. Devon's firm did regularly have late evenings, that was true, especially during quarter close. But the late nights began appearing on Tuesdays and Thursdays, on weeks where there was no quarter close. They began appearing twice a week, on the same 2 days, for 9 consecutive weeks. Patterns repeated. The third pattern had been the phone. Devon had always kept his phone face up on the kitchen counter, the way most people did when they had nothing to hide. In late January, the phone began arriving at the kitchen counter face down. Sometimes it arrived in his pocket and stayed there. He began bringing it into the bathroom when he showered. Sienna did not look at the phone. She did not need to. The fourth pattern had been the calendar. She and Devon shared a calendar for household scheduling, the way many married couples did. In February, Devon began declining the recurring Thursday dinner with her parents on the second week of every month, citing client conflicts. He had attended that dinner for 6 years without complaint. The new conflicts always landed on dinner Thursdays. By the time the receipt fell out of the shirt, Sienna had a list of 43 observations. She did not act on any of them. she kept observing. On the Monday after she found the receipt, she went into her home office at 6 in the morning and opened a new document. This one she labeled with the name of a defunct project that no longer existed in any client folder, so that even if Devon ever opened her laptop, the file would look like archived work. She began to organize what she had. She did not yet know what to do with it. She knew only that she was building an evidence file. Her phone buzzed at 7. It was Priscilla. Priscilla Okafor had been Sienna's best friend since the second week of their first year of college. Priscilla was an attorney now, and had been Sienna's personal lawyer for the entire decade she had run her cybersecurity practice. Priscilla had drafted the prenuptial agreement that Sienna and Devon had signed before their wedding, the one that protected Sienna's house, her practice, and her intellectual property. Devon had signed it because he had been told, correctly, that nothing about Sienna would proceed without it. "You up?" Priscilla said when Sienna picked up. "I'm up. I'm at the gym in 2 hours. Come." Sienna went. They walked on adjacent treadmills at a quiet club on Peachtree where the music was low and the early morning regulars knew not to bother each other. Priscilla was the kind of woman who could carry on 3 conversations at once. This morning she only carried one. "What are you noticing?" Priscilla asked. "A pattern," Sienna said. "It's consistent." "Since when?" "December." Priscilla nodded. She did not say anything for 2 minutes. Then she said, "What do you want?" Sienna thought about that for a long block of road on the treadmill. "I want to know what is true," she said. "I want to handle it the way I would handle anything else." "Meaning what?" "Meaning I want to document it. All of it. I want to know what I am working with before I do anything." Priscilla was a person whose face did not waste expressions. She nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Do it your way. When you have what you have, you call me. I will not lift a finger until you say so. But I will be ready when you say so." "Agreed." They walked another half-mile in silence. The treadmills hummed. "Sienna," Priscilla said. "Yes. You are not going to fall apart. I know. I know you know. I just wanted to say it out loud, so it is on the record between us." Sienna smiled, a small, real smile, the first one in weeks. "On the record," she said. She drove home from the gym and went into her office and began the work of building the file properly. She did it the way she would have done it for any client. She made categories. Communications. Financials. Calendar. Movements. She built a clean folder structure on an external drive that she kept in a small lockbox inside the gun safe in her closet, which had no gun in it because she did not own one and did not want one and never had. The safe was for documents. It had been for documents from the day she had bought the house. Devon did not know the combination. Devon, in fact, had asked her once for the combination, very casually, 3 months ago. He had said he wanted to put his passport in there. Sienna had told him she would put it in there for him. She had taken his passport, placed it in the safe in front of him in the closet without showing him the keypad, and closed the door. He had not asked again. She thought about that, sitting at her desk, looking at the empty document with its category headers, on the Monday after the receipt. She thought, he never asks twice when the first answer is no. He just stops asking. That is how he handles things he cannot get. She wrote the first entry in the file. December 14th, New Cologne. Did not ask. Logged. Then she went and made coffee. The charity gala was held at a hotel in Midtown on a Saturday in April. Devon's firm sponsored a table every year, and every year Sienna attended, partly because she had become friendly with 2 of the wives over time, and partly because the gala raised money for a literacy nonprofit that she believed in. She wore a deep green dress that she had bought at a small boutique on the west side of town, the kind of dress that fit her properly and did not need alterations. Her hair was pinned in a low chignon. Her earrings were a pair her mother had given her when she finished her graduate program. Devon told her she looked nice. He said it the way a man says a thing he is required to say, while looking at his phone. They drove to the hotel separately because he had a meeting that ran late. He had mentioned, that morning, that one of the senior associates from his firm would also be there. He had said the name in the middle of a sentence about something else. Sienna had logged it. When Sienna arrived at the gala, she walked into the foyer and took her time. She greeted 3 people she knew. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. She found Margaret Ashbury, who waved her over to a small group near the silent auction tables. It was Margaret who introduced her, 15 minutes later, to Renata Callaway. Renata wore a black cocktail dress that fit her well. Her smile was the smile of a woman who had been told her smile was charming and had built a career on it. She extended her hand. "Sienna, finally," she said. "Devon has told me so much about you." Sienna took her hand. Renata's grip was firm. Her perfume was the same scent that had begun appearing on Devon's shirt collar in February. Sienna had identified the scent 6 weeks ago by spending 45 minutes at a department store fragrance counter, narrowing it down through a process of elimination. "Has he?" Sienna said, and smiled. The smile was warm in the way that warm smiles can be perfectly cold underneath. "He talks about you all the time. He says you're brilliant. He says you handle the kind of work most people couldn't even understand. That's kind of him. Are you working on anything exciting right now?" Sienna paused. The pause was a half-second, which was within the natural rhythm of polite conversation. In that half-second, she catalogued the question. She catalogued the way the question had been asked. She catalogued the small, specific interest in Renata's eyes, which was not the polite interest of a woman making conversation but the close interest of a woman who had been told to ask. "Nothing I can talk about, unfortunately," Sienna said. "Most of my work is under non-disclosure. The clients prefer it that way." "Of course," Renata said, and laughed lightly. "I shouldn't have asked." "Not at all." Margaret, who had been watching all of this with the attention of a woman who saw what was in front of her, said, "Renata, dear, why don't you go check on the auction items? I think the bidding for the basket Devon and Kenneth donated is closing soon." Renata smiled and excused herself. She crossed the room toward the silent auction tables. Sienna watched her go. Margaret leaned in slightly. "I like you, Sienna," Margaret said quietly. "I just wanted to say so." Sienna looked at her. "Thank you," she said. Margaret nodded and changed the subject smoothly to her grandson's hockey team. They talked about hockey for 3 minutes. Sienna asked the right questions and listened to the answers. She tucked Margaret's comment into the part of her mind where she kept things that might be useful later. Devon arrived 20 minutes after she did. He kissed her cheek for the benefit of the room. He told her he had been delayed by a call. She nodded. She watched him during dinner. She watched the way his eyes tracked Renata across the table, even when he was speaking to someone else. She watched the way Renata laughed at his jokes a quarter beat too late, in the manner of a person who had already heard the joke. She watched the way Devon, when he reached for his wineglass, brushed his fingers along the back of Renata's chair. Sienna ate her salmon. She made polite conversation with the man on her left, who was a partner at an accounting firm and wanted to know whether she had an opinion on a recent breach at a major retailer. She gave him the kind of answer that was technical enough to satisfy him and general enough not to expose any client work. After dinner, the band played, and Devon asked her to dance. He held her loosely. He smelled like the new cologne. She let him lead her around the floor for one song. When the song ended, she thanked him and went to find Margaret. She did not go to the bathroom. She did not powder her nose. She did not, at any point, seek out Renata. She left the gala at 10. Devon stayed. When she got home, she took off the green dress and hung it carefully in the closet. She washed her face. She put on her robe. She went into her office and added 3 entries to the file. April 12, met her, at gala. Confirmed identity. Confirmed she has been told what to ask. Confirmed perfume match. April 12, Margaret Ashbury said I like you in a tone that suggested she has seen something. Note, M.A. may be useful. April 12, D. left gala separately. Came home at 1:47 a.m. smelled of the same perfume. Logged. She closed the laptop. She sat in the quiet of her office for a moment. Then she opened the laptop again and sent one message to Priscilla. It said, I have enough. Time to look at the financials. Priscilla replied within 4 minutes. It said, good. I've been waiting. The financial review took 11 days. Sienna and Priscilla worked through it together, mostly in the evenings, mostly at Priscilla's townhouse in Inman Park, where the dining room table had become a kind of operations center over those 11 days. They ordered Thai food on the 3rd night and Italian on the 5th and Caribbean on the 7th, and they did not talk about anything that was not relevant to the work. Priscilla had pulled the joint accounts. She had pulled the household credit cards. She had pulled the small investment account that Sienna and Devon had opened together when they were first married, into which Devon had been contributing for several years. She had pulled, with Sienna's authorization, the records of Sienna's business accounts, which were entirely separate from the marital ones. Sienna built the picture from the data the way she built every picture, by looking for the small, repeating shape. What she found, on the personal side, was a story she had already begun to suspect. The hotel charges in Charlotte were a small piece of it. There were also charges in Savannah, in Nashville, in 2 different boutique hotels in Atlanta itself. There were jewelry charges at a Lenox Square store that did not match any gift Sienna had received. There was a recurring charge on the 3rd Tuesday of every month for $200 at a salon Sienna had never been to. She logged each one. She did not feel angry. She did not feel sad. She was past those things. She was in the country of work now, where the only emotion was attention. On the 8th night, Priscilla looked up from her laptop and said, Sienna, you need to look at this. Sienna walked around the table. Priscilla had been pulling, in parallel, the publicly available filings of Devon's firm. She had pulled the regulatory disclosures. She had pulled news reports. She had been building, on her own, a context file for any divorce proceeding that might involve Devon's compensation structure. What she had found was a small footnote in a quarterly disclosure from 3 months prior. A senior associate at Devon's firm had been transferred from the Charlotte office to the Atlanta office. The transfer had been approved by the regional vice president, which was Devon. The transfer had come with a $60,000 relocation package, which was on the high end. The associate had been given direct access to a portfolio of accounts that included 2 corporate clients whose security architecture Sienna's practice had been hired to audit. The associate was Renata Calloway. Sienna read the disclosure twice. She walked back to her chair. She sat down. She did not say anything for almost a full minute. Then she said, Priscilla. Yes. We are no longer just looking at infidelity. No, Priscilla said. We are not. Sienna got up. She walked to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water. She drank it slowly. When she came back, she sat down and said, Walk me through it. Priscilla walked her through it. The 2 corporate clients were Halcyon Atlantic Bank and a logistics firm called Ridgewater. Sienna's practice held the security audit contract for both. Both companies banked, separately, with Devon's firm. Devon had personally onboarded the relationship with Halcyon Atlantic 2 years prior. Renata, after her transfer, had been given lead associate status on the Halcyon Atlantic account, which meant Renata had access, through her firm's systems, to a category of internal financial documentation that Halcyon Atlantic shared with its banking partners. Some of that documentation overlapped with information that was relevant to Halcyon Atlantic's security posture. None of that documentation was supposed to leave the firm's controlled environment. "Is there evidence that any of it has left?" Sienna asked. "I don't have access to that," Priscilla said. "You would." Sienna nodded. She called Marcellus Reed the next morning. Marcellus Reed was the lead investigator at the cybersecurity firm Sienna partnered with on technical work that was beyond the capacity of her independent practice. He was a quiet, exacting man who had worked in federal forensics before going private. He had been on 3 breach investigations with Sienna over the past 4 years. He owed her favors. He also liked her, which was different from owing favors and was, in Sienna's experience, more useful in the long run. She did not tell Marcellus the personal piece. She told him the technical piece. She told him she had reason to believe, based on third-party documentation she could share, that there might be unauthorized access patterns connected to the Halcyon Atlantic bank account at a partner firm. She asked him whether he could run a quiet, narrow review of the access logs Sienna already had legitimate authorization to review under her audit contract with Halcyon Atlantic, looking for any anomalies tied to the partner firm's users. Marcellus listened without interrupting. When she was done, he said, "Sienna, how quiet is quiet? Completely quiet. No one else at the bank, no one at the partner firm, no one anywhere. Just you and me. How long do I have?" "Take the time you need." 2 weeks. 3. "I am not in a hurry. I want it right." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. "I will run it." "Thank you." "Sienna." "Yes." "If I find what you think I might find." "Yes." "What are you going to do?" Sienna sat at her kitchen table. The morning light was bright through the windows. She had a cup of coffee that was getting cold. "I am going to make sure the right people see it," she said. "In the right order. At the right time." Marcellus considered that. "All right," he said. "I will be in touch." Sienna ended the call. She walked into her home office and sat at her desk and added a new section to the file. She gave it a clean header. Section 4, Professional Conduct. She wrote one line under it. Subject is no longer protected by the personal frame. Subject has crossed into the professional frame. Treat accordingly. Then she closed the laptop and went outside to her garden, which was small and tidy and bright in the spring sun, and she pulled weeds for 2 hours. She had time. She was going to take it. Yvette Bellamy arrived from Charleston on a Wednesday afternoon in early May, carrying a small overnight bag and a Tupperware container of red rice that she had made the night before in her kitchen on Tradd Street. She had told Sienna, on the phone 2 days earlier, that she had a few things to take care of in Atlanta and would be staying for the long weekend. She had no things to take care of in Atlanta. Sienna knew this. Yvette knew Sienna knew this. Neither of them mentioned it. Yvette was 64 years old. She had taught middle school English for 12 years and then been a high school principal for 19, before retiring to a quiet life of gardening, choir on Wednesdays, and reading the kinds of biographies that came in 300 pages of small print. She wore reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. Her hair was a short silver cap, neatly cut, that she touched up at her hairdresser's every 6 weeks. She walked into Sienna's house, set the overnight bag down by the staircase, walked the red rice into the refrigerator, and turned around in the kitchen with her hands on her hips. "Talk to me," she said. Sienna laughed, a small surprised laugh. "Mama." "Sienna. Sit down. I will make tea." "I will sit down." You will make tea. Then you will talk. Sienna made tea. She sat across from her mother at the kitchen island. The afternoon light was bright through the back windows. The house was quiet. Devon was at the firm. Devon had, in fact, been at the firm a great deal lately, in ways that no longer surprised her. Sienna told her mother everything. She told her about December. She told her about the cologne and the late nights and the phone face down. She told her about the receipt that fell out of the shirt pocket. She told her about the gala and Renata. She told her about Priscilla and the financial review and the 11 days at the dining room table. She told her, in measured language, about what Marcellus was looking at. Yvette listened. She did not interrupt. She drank her tea in small careful sips. She nodded once or twice. She did not gasp. She did not get angry. She was a woman who had been a high school principal for 19 years, which meant she had heard worse things, and she had heard them with composure, because the worst thing she could do for the children in front of her was to lose her composure. When Sienna was finished, Yvette set her teacup down on the island and looked at her daughter for a long moment. "How do you feel?" Yvette said. "Fine," Sienna said. "Sienna." Sienna looked at her hands. Then she looked at her mother. "I feel," she said slowly, "like I am no longer surprised. The being not surprised is what bothers me. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting better from him. And I do not know exactly when that was." Yvette nodded slowly. "That is a true thing," she said. "It is the truest thing you have said since I sat down. Yes. The rest of it, what he is doing, who he is doing it with, that is all the news of the day. The truer thing is that you stopped expecting. And once you stop expecting, you start documenting. And once you start documenting, you have already left the marriage. The papers are just paperwork." Sienna looked at her mother for a long second. "You knew." "I knew you stopped expecting," Yvette said. "I did not know what you knew. I was waiting for you to tell me. How long have you known?" "Since Christmas." Christmas had been 5 months ago. Sienna had hosted Christmas dinner at the house. Devon had stepped out of the room 4 times during dinner to take calls. Yvette had been quiet about it but had watched, the way Yvette watched everything. "Why didn't you say something?" Sienna said. "Because it was not my marriage to save and it was not my marriage to end," Yvette said. "It was yours. And you were going to handle it the way you handle things, which is carefully, on your own time, with all the information lined up. And I was going to wait. And here we are." Sienna laughed again, a small laugh that was almost a sigh. "Mama." "What?" "You are something else." "I know." Yvette stayed for 4 days. She did not bring up Devon again. She did not bring up Renata. She did not ask about the file, or the financials, or what was going to happen next. She cooked. She read her biography in the sun on the back patio. She went with Sienna to the farmer's market on Saturday morning and bought peaches and lavender. She watched a long, slow movie with Sienna on Saturday night, the kind with subtitles, that they had been meaning to watch for years. On Sunday morning, before her flight back to Charleston, Yvette stood in the doorway of Sienna's home office. Sienna was at her desk, working. "2 things," Yvette said. Sienna looked up. "Yes, ma'am." 1. When the time comes for you to have the harder day, the day you go in there and finish this, I want you to call me the morning of. Not after. Before. I want to know you are about to do it, even if I am not in the room. Okay. 2. When you walk out of that day, whatever happens, you walk out wearing color. Not black. Not gray. Color. Do you hear me? Sienna smiled. Her eyes were a little wet, in a way she did not bother to hide. Yes, ma'am. Yvette nodded, satisfied. All right, she said. I am going to go pack. You are going to drive me to the airport. We are going to get coffee on the way. They did all those things. On the drive back from the airport, Sienna stopped at a stoplight on Northside Drive and sat with her hands on the wheel and felt, for the first time in months, something settle in her that she had not realized was unsettled. Her mother had seen what was in front of her. Her mother had not flinched. Her mother had told her to wear color. It was a small thing. It was also exactly what Sienna had needed. She drove home and called Beatrice Halloway and asked if she still wanted to have lunch. Beatrice Halloway met Sienna at a restaurant on the 72nd floor of a building downtown, the kind of restaurant where the windows were the size of walls and the city looked, from that height, like a clean architectural model. Beatrice was 58 years old and had founded Halloway & Vance Consulting 26 years prior, in a one-room office with 2 employees. The firm now had offices in 8 cities and a security and risk practice that was generating, by Sienna's estimation, somewhere around $40 million a year in revenue. Beatrice had been quietly trying to recruit Sienna for 2 years. Sienna had said no twice. Politely both times. She had liked her independence. She had liked running her own practice. She had liked the size of her work and the directness of her client relationships. She walked into the restaurant in a deep blue blazer and white blouse and well-cut slacks, her hair in a sleek low bun, her watch on her left wrist. Beatrice was already at the table, looking out the window at the city. Sienna, Beatrice said, standing. You said yes. I said lunch. Yes, you did. They sat. They ordered. They talked, for the first 10 minutes, about other things, the way people who respected each other did before getting to the work. Beatrice asked about Sienna's mother. Sienna asked about Beatrice's grandchildren. The waiter came and went. When the entrees arrived, Beatrice put her napkin on her lap, looked at Sienna across the table, and said, "Why are we here?" Sienna had thought about how to answer this question for the entire drive downtown. I am thinking about my next chapter, she said. I am open to a conversation about what that might look like, if it is the right fit. Beatrice nodded slowly. What changed, she said. Sienna was quiet for a moment. My life is changing, she said. I am going to need a new structure around me. I have built one structure on my own for 10 years. I have done good work. I am at a ceiling I built myself. I would like to build the next thing somewhere where the structure is bigger. Beatrice did not ask any of the questions a lesser person would have asked. She did not ask what was changing. She did not ask whether Sienna was all right. She had been in too many rooms with too many people to ask those questions when they were not the right questions. She said, I have an offer to make. I have had it ready for 8 months. Sienna almost laughed. Tell me, she said. Beatrice told her. Halloway & Vance was forming a new practice, called the Corporate Threat and Resilience Group. It would absorb the firm's existing cybersecurity work and expand it into a full-service offering covering breach response, regulatory liaison, and pre-litigation forensics. It would have its own profit and loss responsibility. It would report directly to Beatrice. It would have a starting team of 14, growing to 30 within 18 months. It needed a managing director. Beatrice wanted Sienna for the role. The compensation package was generous. The equity component was substantial. The autonomy was complete. Sienna listened all the way through. Then she said, What would you need from me to know I am the right answer? Beatrice smiled. I need 3 things, she said. 1. I need you to bring at least 2 of your existing client relationships with you, so that the practice has revenue from day 1. 2. I need you to bring at least 1 senior person from your network into the team in the first 90 days, someone you trust. 3. I need you to commit for 3 years. The first two are easy, Sienna said. Halcyon Atlantic and Ridgewater will come with me, and I have a lead investigator I have worked with for years who I would want to bring in as the head of forensics within the first quarter. Marcellus Reed. You know him. I have wanted him for 4 years. Sienna nodded. The 3 years, she said, is the harder one. It is. Not because I cannot commit. Because I do not commit to things until I am ready. Fair. Give me 30 days. Done. They shook hands across the table. Sienna walked out of the restaurant onto the sidewalk and stood for a moment in the bright midday light. The city moved around her. A woman in a red coat walked past with a coffee. A bus wheezed at the corner. The sun bounced off the glass of the building across the street. Sienna pulled out her phone and called Priscilla. I just had lunch with Beatrice. And? She offered. I asked for 30 days. Why 30 days? Because the divorce is going to be filed before I sign anything else. I want the paperwork on the marriage to be moving before the paperwork on the next chapter is signed. I do not want them tangled. Priscilla was quiet for a beat. You want to file in 30 days, she said. I want to file in 30 days. Okay, Priscilla said. I will have the petition ready in 3 weeks. We file when you say. Agreed. Sienna ended the call. She did not go straight home. She drove to Buckhead. She had been quietly looking, for 2 months, at a building she liked, a small condominium tower with broad balconies and good security and a unit on the 11th floor that had been on the market for 40 days. She had not made an offer. She had been waiting. She walked through the unit with the listing agent. She walked through it slowly. She stood at the windows in the living room and looked out at the green canopy of the neighborhood and the buildings rising beyond it. She made an offer that afternoon, with a flexible close. The seller accepted by evening. She did not tell Devon. She did not tell anyone except Priscilla and her mother. She had a lot of work to do, and she was going to do it without anyone watching. Marcellus Reed called Sienna on a Friday morning at 6:45. She was already awake, sitting at her kitchen island in her robe, drinking coffee. Devon was upstairs, still asleep, having come home at 11 the night before from what he had told her was a client dinner. She picked up on the second ring. She walked, with the phone, into her home office and closed the door behind her. Tell me, she said. I have it, Marcellus said. I need a private meeting. Today, if you can. Where? My office. 10. Done. She arrived at 10 with a notebook and a thumb drive in her bag. Marcellus's office was on the 4th floor of a small building in Decatur, a clean, modest space that did not advertise what was done inside it. The door said only, in small black letters, Reed Partners. Marcellus closed the door behind her and sat down at his desk and turned the monitor toward her. I am going to walk you through this in order, he said. Take your time. Stop me if you need me to clarify. Sienna nodded. Marcellus walked her through it. Over a 6-week window, beginning approximately 2 weeks after Renata Calloway's transfer to the Atlanta office, there had been a series of access events on the Halcyon Atlantic Bank Shared Documentation Portal. The portal was a controlled access environment used by Halcyon Atlantic to share specific quarterly reporting documents with its banking partners. Renata's credentials, as the lead associate on the Halcyon Atlantic account, had legitimate access to the portal during defined windows. What Marcellus had found was that her credentials had also been used to access the portal during windows that were not defined. Specifically, on 6 separate occasions, the credentials had been used to download documents that were labeled as confidential security architecture summaries. Those documents had been requested by Renata's credentials at hours that did not match her firm's working schedule. 3 of the downloads had occurred between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. 2 had occurred on a Sunday. One had occurred during what Marcellus had cross-referenced as a known holiday for Renata's firm. Sienna watched the screen. "Who approved her elevated access?" she asked. Marcellus clicked over to a different document. "The access elevation was authorized in the firm's internal system," he said. "By a regional vice president." He clicked once more. The name on the screen was Devon Bellamy. Sienna did not move. She had thought, walking up the stairs to Marcellus's office, about how she would respond if the answer landed where she suspected it would land. She had imagined the moment. She had thought she might feel a sharp, hot thing. A wave of something. What she felt was clear and quiet. She had already grieved the marriage. The grieving had been done in small private hours, on the long drives home from client meetings, in the bathtub at night, on her mother's back patio in Charleston in March. The marriage had been over for some time. What was on the screen was something else. What was on the screen was a man who had taken a thing that did not belong to him and used it to give a woman a key. She turned to Marcellus. "Walk me through what we have, in formal terms," she said. He did. He had documented 6 unauthorized access events. He had documented the elevation of access that had enabled them. He had cross-referenced the timing with available calendar data. He had, in his own preliminary assessment, the basis for a referral to Halcyon Atlantic's internal compliance group, which would, under the audit contract Sienna held, be the appropriate channel. "What is missing?" Sienna said. "What is missing is what the documents went on to be used for. The access logs end at the point of download. To find out what happened to those documents after they were downloaded, the bank's compliance group would have to open a formal investigation. They have the authority to do that. We do not." "Right. Sienna." "Yes. You understand what you are looking at?" "Yes." "You understand who this is going to land on?" "Yes." Marcellus nodded slowly. "How do you want to proceed?" he said. Sienna sat for a long moment, thinking. "I need 3 weeks," she said. "I need 3 weeks to handle a personal matter that needs to be handled before this is delivered to the bank. After those 3 weeks, you will deliver the report through the normal channel, with my authorization as the audit lead. We will treat it the way we would treat any breach finding. The personal piece will not be in the report. The personal piece is mine." 3 weeks. "Yes. I can do 3 weeks. Thank you." She walked out of his office at 11:15. She did not warn Devon. She did not, that night, look at him any differently than she had looked at him for the past month. She came home. She made dinner. She asked him how his day had been. He said it had been fine. He said he had been thinking they should plan a vacation in the late summer, somewhere warm, somewhere they could relax. She said that sounded nice. She said she would look at her calendar. Devon kissed her on the cheek and went upstairs to take a call. Sienna cleaned the kitchen. She folded the dish towel and hung it neatly on the hook beside the sink. She went into her home office and added 1 entry to the file. May 24th, Marcellus has confirmed everything. 3-week clock begins now. Inform Priscilla. Inform Beatrice on day 15. Halcyon notification on day 21. She closed the laptop. She went upstairs and went to bed. She slept very well. The divorce petition was filed on a Tuesday morning at 9:15. Priscilla filed it in Fulton County. Sienna was at her kitchen table when Priscilla called to confirm. The filing was straightforward. Sienna was not seeking spousal support. Sienna was not seeking division of any of her own assets. The prenuptial agreement was clean. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and asked for a clean dissolution. Devon would be served at his office at 11 a.m. Sienna had timed the filing to a specific morning. She had chosen the day that Devon was scheduled to be in the office for the firm's monthly all-hands meeting, which ran from 9:30 to 10:30. By the time he came out of the meeting and back to his desk, the process server would already have left the lobby. She had not warned him. She had timed it that way on purpose. She had also, with Priscilla, quietly arranged for the closing on the Buckhead condominium, which had occurred the previous Friday. Sienna had owned the condominium for 4 days before the divorce filing. She had, over the previous 2 weeks, slowly moved her essential personal effects there. Clothing, books, files, her grandmother's pearls, the small painting from a gallery in Charleston that her mother had given her when she finished her graduate program, the standing desk from her home office, her external drives, her safe. She had moved the things in small loads, on weekday afternoons, when Devon was at work and the neighborhood was quiet. She had taken nothing that was Devon's. She had taken nothing that had been gifted by Devon. She had taken nothing that was a household communal item. She had left him the bedroom furniture. She had left him the kitchen. She had left him the dining room table where she had hosted Christmas dinner for 6 years. She had left him the house. The house was, as it had always been, in her name. He could stay in it for the duration of the proceedings, which Priscilla had built in as a 90-day window in the petition. After 90 days, the house would be vacated. Sienna would take possession. She did not yet know whether she would sell it or rent it. She would decide later. On the Tuesday of the filing, Sienna woke up at 6. She did her usual morning routine. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen island and watched the sun come up over the back garden. Devon came downstairs at 7. He was already dressed for the office. He was talking on his phone. He waved at her vaguely as he poured himself coffee. He kissed her temple in a distracted way as he passed her on his way out the door. He did not know that this was the last morning he would have in the house with her in it. She had wanted it that way. Not because she was vindictive. Because she was tired. She had, over the months of the build, learned that there was a difference between the impulse for revenge and the discipline of a clean exit. Revenge was a hot, busy thing. It required a lot of attention. It produced messy outcomes. It often, in the end, hurt the person seeking it as much as it hurt the person being acted upon. A clean exit was different. A clean exit was quiet. It moved its furniture out in small loads on weekday afternoons. It signed papers in lawyers' offices. It walked out a front door for the last time without saying anything to the empty rooms. Sienna walked out of her front door for the last time at 7:45 that morning. She drove to Buckhead. She had a moving service scheduled to bring the last large items at 9. They were on time. She had hired a service that would also unpack and place items according to a labeled diagram she had drawn for them. She walked through the new condominium while they worked. The unit was on the 11th floor. The light was bright through the windows. The kitchen was open to the living room. The bedroom faced east. By 11, the moving crew was finished. Sienna tipped them well. They thanked her and left. At 11:12, Priscilla called. "It's done," Priscilla said. He was served in the lobby of his building. "Good. He will call you." "I know. Do not pick up." "I will not." "He will go to the house." "He can go to the house." "He will see what is missing." "He will." "He will be furious." "He is going to be many things in the coming weeks." "Furious is the easiest one." Priscilla was quiet for a moment. "Sienna." "Yes." "You are doing this right." "I know. I just wanted to say it." "Thank you." Devon called Sienna 7 times that afternoon. She did not pick up. He sent 14 text messages. She read them. She did not respond. The text messages moved through 3 stages. Stage 1, confusion. What is this? Why did I get served? Why did you not talk to me? Call me. Stage 2, charm. I love you. We need to talk. This is a misunderstanding. We can work through anything. Please. Stage 3, anger. You have lost your mind. You have humiliated me. You will regret this. I will fight you on every single thing. Sienna read all of them. She forwarded all of them to Priscilla, who logged them. She did not respond. At 7 that evening, Renata Callaway called Sienna's phone from a number Sienna had never seen. Sienna let the call go to voicemail. Renata did not leave a message. Sienna deleted the missed call. She did not need to know what Renata had wanted to say. There was nothing Renata could say that was worth a second of her attention. The conversation that mattered was not with Renata. The conversation that mattered was with the bank, in 2 weeks, when Marcellus filed his report. That night, Sienna stood at the windows of her new bedroom and looked out at the lights of Buckhead in the dark green canopy of the trees and the headlights moving along the avenue 11 floors below. She had moved out. She had filed. She had a new home. She had a new chapter waiting to be signed. And in 2 weeks, the rest of it was going to land where it was meant to land. She slept in her own bed in her own home for the first time in 8 years, and she slept very deeply. Marcellus filed his report with Halcyon Atlantic's compliance group on a Wednesday morning, exactly 21 days after Sienna had asked for the 3-week window. The report was 46 pages. It was professional, precise, and comprehensive. It identified the unauthorized access events. It identified the credentials used. It identified the elevation that had enabled the access. It cross-referenced timing data. It made no accusation about intent. It made no accusation about persons. It simply presented the data, as breach reports were meant to do. Halcyon Atlantic's compliance group received the report at 10:15 in the morning. By 11, the report was on the desk of the bank's chief information officer, Tomas Greaves. Tomas Greaves had worked with Sienna for 4 years. He trusted her. When he received Marcellus's report, his first call was to Sienna. She picked up on the second ring. Sienna. Tomas. You know what is in this report. I commissioned the review under our standing audit contract. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Sienna. The senior associate named in the access elevation. The vice president who authorized her access. There is something you would like to tell me. Yes, Sienna said. The vice president, Devin Bellamy, is my husband. We are in the middle of a divorce that I filed 2 weeks ago. The senior associate, Renata Callaway, is the woman with whom I have reason to believe he has been involved. I want to say that on the record because I do not want this report to be tainted by undisclosed relationships. I commissioned the review on the basis of legitimate audit findings. The review was conducted independently by Reed Partners. The findings are what they are. They would have been delivered to you regardless of the personal background. The personal background was not the reason. It is, however, the context. And you deserve to have the context. Tomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Sienna. Thank you for telling me. That took integrity. It did not take integrity. It was the right thing to do. Same thing. Tomas. Yes. What happens next is not mine to manage. The report is yours. The investigation is yours. I am withdrawing from the active audit relationship for the duration of any internal proceeding, to remove any conflict. Reed Partners will continue to support you on the technical side independent of my practice. Once the proceeding is closed, we can discuss whether there is a basis for resuming the relationship under whatever new arrangement makes sense. You are taking yourself out. For the duration. Yes. What are you doing about your practice? I am moving it, Sienna said. I am joining Holloway and Vance Consulting in their new corporate threat and resilience group. I begin formally in 30 days. I would like, when this proceeding is closed, to bring Halcyon Atlantic with me as a client of the new practice. That conversation will happen later. Today is just the report. Tomas Greaves laughed once, a short, surprised laugh. Sienna, he said. I am going to want that conversation. I thought you might. When this is over. When this is over. He thanked her again and they ended the call. What followed unfolded over the next 11 days, the way these things did, in stages that were public and stages that were not. Halcyon Atlantic's compliance group opened a formal investigation. They notified Devon's firm in writing. The firm placed Renata Calloway on administrative leave the same afternoon. The firm's general counsel called Devon into a meeting that ended with him being placed on administrative leave as well, pending the outcome of the investigation. Within a week, Devon's firm had brought in outside counsel. Within 10 days, Halcyon Atlantic had filed a notification with the federal financial regulator, which was required under their disclosure obligations. On the 11th day, the regulator opened its own preliminary review. Devon called Sienna twice during this period. On the first call, his voice was tight. He said, Sienna, I do not know what you have done. I do not know what you have said to anyone. But this needs to stop. He left the message on her voicemail. She forwarded it to Priscilla. On the second call, his voice was different. He said, Sienna. Please. Please. We can work this out. I will tell them. I will tell them she made me. I will tell them anything. Just call me back. He left this message on her voicemail too. She forwarded that one to Priscilla as well. Priscilla called Sienna after receiving the second forward. He is going to try to throw her under the bus, Priscilla said. I know. It may not work. It will not work. The elevation of access was authorized through his login credentials, his approval chain, and his digital signature on the workflow. Whatever he did or did not personally request from her, the authorization is on him. Right. He is the one who let her in. Yes. That is the part he cannot take back. No. 2 days after the second call, Devon's firm announced his resignation. The press release used the language of mutual decision. Inside the firm, the language was different. Renata Calloway was terminated for cause 1 week later, after the regulator's preliminary findings indicated that her credentials had been the vector for the unauthorized access. The regulator's investigation continued. Sienna read the press release in her office at her new firm. She had begun at Holloway and Vance 2 weeks earlier. She had a corner office on the 34th floor with windows on 2 sides. She had an executive assistant, a young woman named Cordelia who was sharp and quick. She had begun the work of building the practice. Marcellus had joined as head of forensics, as planned. They had hired 4 others in the first 3 weeks. The work was good. When she finished reading the press release, she closed the browser tab. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel sad. She felt, mostly, like a person who had finished a project that had been on her desk for a long time and had been delivered cleanly to the right people. She walked into Marcellus's office, which was 3 doors down from hers. He looked up. It is done, she said. I saw. How do you feel, he said, after a moment. She thought about it. Like I am ready for the next thing, she said. He nodded. Good, he said. We have a meeting at 3. The pharmaceutical client. They want to talk about red team work. I will be ready. She went back to her office and got back to work. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Devon did not contest any of the terms. He had no leverage. The prenuptial agreement was clean. The marital assets, after the asset split that the prenuptial protected, came to a small enough number that it was barely worth the legal effort of fighting it. He signed. Sienna received the final decree in the mail on a Friday afternoon. She read it once. She filed it in the bottom drawer of her new desk. She went home to her apartment and changed into running clothes and went for a run on the Beltline as the sun went down, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, light. 6 months later, the Southeast Cybersecurity Council held its annual awards dinner at a hotel in Midtown Atlanta. The hotel ballroom had been transformed for the evening. White linens. Bright crystal centerpieces. The lighting was bright above the stage, slightly cooler over the round tables that filled the floor. The room was full. 600 people, by the official count. Practitioners. Executives. Federal agency liaisons. Press. Sienna had been notified 4 weeks earlier that she had been selected as the Southeast Cybersecurity Consultant of the Year. The selection was made by a panel of her peers. The criteria included contribution to the field, response to a major industry-relevant incident, and demonstrated leadership in the past year. The panel had not, when notifying her, given specific reasoning. They had said only that the decision had been unanimous and that they hoped she would accept. She had accepted. She wore a deep blue gown that night. Floor length. Long sleeves. A simple neckline. She had bought it 3 weeks earlier, at a small atelier on the west side of Atlanta, where the seamstress had taken 3 fittings to get the shoulders right. The gown was the color her mother had told her, sitting at the kitchen island in May, to wear. Her hair was up, in a polished chignon. Her grandmother's pearls were at her ears. Her watch was on her left wrist. Yvette had flown in from Charleston that morning. She sat at table number 4, in the front, in a deep maroon dress that she had bought specifically for this evening. Priscilla sat next to her, in royal blue. Marcellus sat across from them. Beatrice Halloway sat at the head of table 4. Cordelia, Sienna's assistant, sat on the other side of Beatrice. Tomas Greaves, who had over the past 3 months become a friend in addition to a client, sat with his wife to Marcellus's left. Sienna's table. She walked into the ballroom on her own. She greeted the people she greeted on the way to her table. She sat. She had a small glass of sparkling water. She listened to the speeches that came before hers. She watched the room. When the Master of Ceremonies announced the Consultant of the Year, the room quieted. Her name appeared on the screen behind the stage. The room applauded. Sienna stood. Yvette reached out and touched her wrist as she passed, a small private gesture that Sienna would remember for years. She walked to the stage. She climbed the 3 steps. She crossed the stage to the podium. She set her notes on the podium. She looked out at the room. The lights were bright. The room was warm with applause that had not yet settled. She waited for it to settle. When it did, she began. "Thank you," she said. "To the panel, to the council, to my peers in this room. I am grateful." She looked down at her notes for a moment. Then she looked up. "I was given a piece of advice once, by my mother, who is sitting in this room. She told me, when the time comes for you to walk into a room and finish a thing, you walk in wearing color. Not black. Not gray. Color. I have thought about that advice many times in the past year. I have thought about what it means to walk into a room." She paused. Cybersecurity is, on the surface, a technical field. We talk about firewalls and 0 days and access vectors. But underneath all of that, we are doing something simple. We are watching the patterns. We are noticing what does not belong. We are documenting what is true. And when the time is right, we are bringing what is true to the people who need to see it. Quietly. Cleanly. In the right order, at the right time. She looked across the room. She did not look for any face in particular. She did not need to. Most of the work I am proudest of in my career, no one will ever see. That is the nature of this work. The clients we serve are protected by the things we do not say in public. The breaches that do not happen, the data that does not leave, the harm that does not land. These are the wins. They are quiet wins. The point is that they are wins. She smiled, a small steady smile. This past year, I have had reason to be reminded that the principles that hold in our work also hold in our lives. Notice the patterns. Document what is true. Do not raise your voice when a clean record will do. Trust the process. Trust the people you have built around you. And when the moment comes to act, act once, act clearly, and walk forward. She paused again. To my mother, who taught me to wear color. To Priscilla Okafor, who has been my friend for 20 years and my counsel for 10. To Marcellus Reed, who saw what was on the screen and did not flinch. To Beatrice Halloway, who waited 2 years for an answer and was patient with me when the answer finally came. To Tomas Greaves, who trusted me when trust was the only currency that mattered. To my team at Halloway & Vance, who are the best group of people I have ever worked with. Thank you. She picked up the award from the podium. Walk in wearing color, she said. Good evening. She left the stage. The room was on its feet. The applause was loud. Yvette was standing with her hands pressed to her chest. Priscilla had a tissue she did not bother to use. Marcellus was clapping in the steady, measured way of a man who did not give standing ovations easily and who was giving one now. Sienna walked back to her table. She sat down. Yvette took her hand under the table. They held hands through the next 2 awards. Yvette did not say anything. Sienna did not say anything. They did not need to. Outside the ballroom, in the long gallery that led to the lobby, an industry photographer asked if she would pose for a picture with the award. She did. She held the award lightly. She smiled. She was tired in the good way, the way that meant a long day of meaningful work was ending. Beatrice walked up beside her after the photograph. I have one more piece of news for you tonight, Beatrice said. Yes. The board met this afternoon. We are formally elevating the Corporate Threat and Resilience Group to a full division of the firm, effective the 1st of next quarter. You will be the division president. Same equity, more authority, full P&L for the entire division. Sienna looked at her. Beatrice. You earned it. You have earned it 3 times over. We are going to do the formal announcement on Monday. I wanted you to know tonight. Sienna laughed, a small real laugh. Thank you, she said. You are welcome. Beatrice walked away to find her husband. Sienna stood for a moment in the gallery, holding the award. The hallway was bright. Her mother was coming toward her with her purse on her arm. Priscilla was a few steps behind her, talking on her phone. Marcellus was waiting at the end of the gallery with Tomas, the 2 of them in conversation about something that was making them both laugh quietly. Sienna looked at all of them. She thought about a round table at Verdant 8 months ago. About a sapphire blue dress and a man's laugh and a sentence she had been asked to say. She thought about what she had said. She thought about what she had not said. And she thought about the reply she had been carrying. The reply that she had not given that night, because the reply had not been ready yet, and because the right answer was not a sentence at a dinner table. The right answer was a building. The right answer was a chapter. The right answer was a stage and a deep blue gown and a room of 600 people and a mother in the front row in maroon. The right answer was who she had become while no one was looking. Yvette reached her side and tucked her arm into Sienna's. "Let us go," Yvette said. "It is late. I want pie." "Yes, ma'am." They walked together down the bright gallery toward the lobby, Priscilla a step behind, Marcellus and Tomas joining them at the doors. The night outside was clear. The valet had her car ready. Sienna gave her keys to Priscilla, who was driving them, and slid into the back seat with her mother. Yvette looked at her in the half-light of the back seat. "You wore color," Yvette said. "I did." "You said what you needed to say." "I did." "You are all right." "I am all right." Yvette nodded, satisfied. "Good," she said. "Now, pie." Sienna laughed. Priscilla pulled out of the hotel driveway and turned onto the avenue. The lights of Midtown were bright over the tops of the trees. Sienna leaned her head back against the seat. She was tired. She was happy. She was free. The story was over. And it was beginning.